Hey there guys, how's it going for today? In this video for today I'll be having a discussion about why I don't really love tribal decks. Alright, so in this video I'm discussing why I don't really like or love tribal decks. Look, I've got a tribal deck, and I've had some tribal decks in the past, but that's kind of why I also don't like tribal decks that much, because I have played them before and I just don't really like them that much. I don't love them. I don't hate them per se. I just don't really get enthused about playing them. I try to avoid playing them. I just don't see any point in building tribal decks. I just have no real interest in it. I always avoid looking at tribal decks. If anything, I sort of think about leads down the tribal route, I immediately sort of go, well, it's not a tribal deck or whatever. It's whatever this is or whatever that is. It's doing this other theme, like Olivia when I was building that deck for a little while and whatnot. A lot of people, as I sort of said, would say, oh, you've got a vampire deck. And I'm like, no, I don't have a vampire deck, but you've got a vampire commander. Yes, since I've got a vampire commander, it must mean that I have a vampire deck, because that's all the card does apparently. All you can see is the super type or the creature type or whatever. It doesn't do anything else, has no other relevant text. It's vampire, therefore it's vampire tribal deck. Right, cool. That's what one of my main problems about some of that stuff. But again, that's not the main reason why I don't like tribal decks, but it's just one of those symptoms of Commander, and I don't really like that either, that no one really reads what your card actually does. They just read whatever creature type your commander is and just goes, oh, okay, so you're playing XYZ tribal, you're playing human tribal, you're playing this, whatever, you're playing, nightmare tribal, whatever, they don't read what your card does. Oh, you're playing Muldrotha, you must be playing Ooze tribal. It can't be, a reanimator deck. No, that's not what Muldrotha does. Muldrotha doesn't do anything. It's just an ooze. Therefore, it's ooze tribal, 100%. Not that you can't play ooze tribal or some of these other tribes. If you have a commander that is that tribe, you can certainly build it in that regard and be like, okay, cool, I'm just going to build a janky ooze deck with this or whatnot, whatever. Or I'm just going to build tribal minions or whatever. You can do that with whatever commander you want. But the thing is, when a commander says, I do this, I do that, I put +1/+1 counters on stuff, or I put, tokens into play, or I cheat things into play from my hand, or I cheat things in from the graveyard, or whatever, any other synergies, whatever it does, because there's so many synergies. It cares about auras, it cares about equipments, it cares about, exiling stuff from the graveyard, things like this, artifacts, whatnot. That's usually the thing I focus in on. I usually focus in on what the card actually does, so I often go with the theme of what the deck is doing more so. And one of the bigger reasons why I don't like tribal decks is I don't like being stuck to a tribe too much. Again, I have a tribal deck and I've tried to stick to the tribe in that deck, but again, I've found a lot of times that it's just and I know I've set myself and set my expectations fairly low for that deck, but even so, it just is not very good, and I've felt well, I might as well put in these good cards, even though they're not really of the tribe, because there's already so many cards that aren't exactly in the tribe anyway. It's just more about making things work, I guess, so that the deck actually functions and flows in a somewhat of a way. So that was the main idea of why I decided to start changing it. But I hate that you have to do that. I hate that you have to go, well, I'm just play Beast Whisperer because it's a really good card. I don't want to not be 100% tribal. I want to be 100% tribal in my tribal deck. That's the point of a tribal deck, in my opinion. You're not meant to have these other tribes. That is what makes it, interesting and fun and a challenge or whatnot, whatever. For the most part, is to okay, I'm going to stick to the tribe as much as possible, and the rest is going to be instants, sorceries, artifacts, and enchantments and whatnot. The rest all the creatures are going to be on tribe. Um, Already that sort of failed when I first started to build that deck, because it was like, well, there's like 5 squirrels, so it's harder to build that deck as a tribal deck, but the main theme was squirrels. So I started being like, well, since the main theme is just squirrels, maybe I'll put in a few cards like Beast Whisperer and whatnot, just to bolster up what's going on, because again, it just sort of suffers from that issue of not being very good, and it already has too many things that are not on tribe to sort of, augment the deck into that realm anyway. But then again, as I said, I don't love that, because it's just one of those things where I want to be tribal. I want to be all the tribal, and I don't want to have to run these cards just because they're good. I don't want to, like, this is one of those debates about maybe colors and whatnot that maybe I'll talk about in another video. But it's like, where people will run, Arcane Signet in a green deck. I have no clue why people run Arcane Signet in a green deck. Yeah, I get it that you can tap it right away and, summon something else or whatnot for 1 mana if you have 1 mana or worth of something to cast, or whatnot. You have, maybe another open mana somewhere so you can still use it right away. I get that. But again, I just don't love cards like that in those decks, because it's like, well, why am I running this random artifact if I play all my creatures that are, destroying artifacts and whatnot, all the artifacts on the battlefield, my Arcane Signet's going to be blown up too, like, and maybe I'll get some benefit out of that, maybe if I'm running the right ones, but again, maybe I'm not. But green doesn't care about artifacts. Green has no synergy with artifacts, really. So it's just one of those things where I just don't get why people run Mana Rocks. Like Sol Ring, I get why, because it's just the face of the format and it's just so amazingly, dumbly good and whatnot. No, we've already gone through all of that sort of stuff. But again, it's one of those things. I just don't get why people run these cards. Oh, because I just don't happen to have them. And that's kind of like the default answer. People can't be stuffed, digging around and getting deeper into cards and whatnot and all this other stuff, because, well, this is the only card that I know or whatever, or this is the only card that I so happen to have, and I can't be bothered finding other ones, can't be bothered finding, Rampant Growth, Cultivate, even though I don't think Cultivate and Kadama's Reach are that amazing, you can find better ones, mostly, and things like that. So, yeah, it's just one of those things, like, people will just, like, go, well, what are the staples? And maybe this is a bit of another discussion for another day, but again, I just do find that staples take over. But anyway, again, the main thing is I just don't like to be restricted. I don't like that too much. I just find, I understand, restrictions breed creativity, but when you're dealing with a deck, especially the deck that I sort of have, I guess it's one of those things where you're just like, well, there's like 5 squirrels, and what am I meant to do? Like, this is like meant to be a funny, janky, like silly deck, but still I want it to work. So I need some card draw, and I need some ramp, and I need other cards in it and whatnot to make it work. So, it's one of those things where it's just like sometimes you've got to make those tough decisions and tough choices. Like, again, I'll see somebody, like, I know a friend who has a werewolf deck, and I know a few other people who have built the werewolf deck and whatnot as well. And I see them running all these random weird things, and I'm just like, and not like random wolf weird things, I guess, is more of the thing, because if they were at least tribal to wolves, or at least they really helped wolves out, like, or werewolves out, I would get it. I kind of get why they, like, some people run whatever it is, the artifact that, the flash one from standard Eldraine. I can't remember what it's called. Basically, gives your creature double strike and it costs less to cast for each creature that's attacking. I get why people run that, because whenever your creature deals combat damage, whenever your werewolves deal combat damage, you get to draw a card. So if it has double strike, you get to draw 2 cards, which is pretty decent. But again, I just still don't really get it. It's just like, why are you running this random equipment artifact or whatever, your deck's not like a Voltron deck and that or whatnot. Like if you gave all your creatures double strike, then that'd be great, because then, like, you're drawing a lot of cards. But then again, that might be too many cards. But then again, I think like drawing too many cards is sometimes like one of those things where, oh well, too bad. It's one of those things I often think about, like some people, as I say, running Reliquary Tower. I don't agree with running Reliquary Tower in any deck, pretty much. I just don't see the point in running Reliquary Tower. I don't care about having no maximum hand size. It's just not worth my time to have no maximum hand size, in my opinion. Like, most of the time, I'll just discard a whole bunch of lands if I've drawn too many cards. Like, that's often the thing. But sometimes I don't think about that. Sometimes you just be like, oh, well, I don't want to overflow on my hand with cards, because what if I just draw like all my gas and then just have to discard all my gas? That sometimes happens. Or you just like, oh, okay, I just drew 6 lands straight. Wow, that was not worth my time to even cast that spell, because now I just have to discard all those cards that I just drew, because they're all lands and I can't use them at all. I can only play 1 land per turn. This is a bit dumb. So it's one of those things where, like having some control, like that's kind of why I put Abundance in that deck. It's not that amazing, because like maybe you'll get it here and there once or twice, but when you need to draw gas instead of just drawing another random land, it's so good. Or if you need to actually like, well, I just have no real lands, I have no real mana, and I just need to get, or well, I do have some or whatever, but I just need to get to 5, or I need to get to 6, or I need to get to 7 so I can double spell and cast these 2 spells together so that I can do something, blah, 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 whatever. I can do this and I can do that, and get ahead where I'm trying to get ahead and that. So it's just one of those things where it is kind of okay. I haven't really played it that much, but I can, like, I've seen it a few times here and there to be like, oh yes, it's okay in this deck. It does something, or it does something-ish. So, like when you have mass draw, and you have constant mass draw, it's would be really good. But that deck just does not have much mass draw, and that's the problem. And that's one of the things, like, where I could just be like, well, instead of running all these random cards that don't really do much, I could just run 5 or 6 tutors to actually just tutor up my Toski, or tutor up the card draw effects that I do need, or whatever I do need at the time. That is something I could do with the deck again. So this is another problem that I find with like a lot of decks, is like they rely too much on tutors. Like it's like any aggro deck, as you always say, it folds to board wipes pretty much. So it's one of those things that it's just like, well, I don't want to rely on tutors, because again, I know I fold to board wipes, but I haven't got anything really to stop board wipes anyway, and I just don't like running them or whatnot. Those spells, I don't think that they're that relevant. I think I discussed this in a video a little while back. I'm not sure how long ago it was now, but it might have been a bit ago. But again, I think Reanimation's a lot better, just overall. So Reanimation is kind of just like drawing your best cards that you've already played, I guess. So that's my idea of like, oh, look, these cards were good. Oh, look, they can be good again. Might as well bring them back from the graveyard. So it's one of those things that I think, a lot about, like not trying to get into tribal as much, which is kind of why I've stifled myself, I guess, in a lot of things, is because I've gone, well, I don't want to play tribal. I'm just not that interested in playing tribal. Because there's not really anything that ever interests me that much. I really like tokens and token generation, and like going wide and just attacking and that sort of thing. That's mostly what I like. I just like going to the combat step and doing shenanigans, and whatnot. So some deck that I was just building recently was the new Taurens from Crimson Vow, and someone was like, "Oh, you're building a human tribal deck," and this was like, again, one of the problems that I had. It was like, "No, I'm not building a human tribal deck." They were like, "Meh." I'm like, "What?" And they were like, "Didn't you buy the human tribal precon deck?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Well, what are you doing with all those cards?" I'm like, "I'm using like some of them to bolster up this deck a little bit because I'm, looking for all the coven stuff. I'm looking for all the power doublers. I'm looking for all the things that, give me, different things and different keywords and things like this or whatnot, or +1 counters or whatnot, this sort of stuff. Card draw, different things like that." So again, I wasn't going down that route, but then I was like looking at building Edgar Markov, building that vampire deck, and I was like, "Oh, do I really want to do this? Because I don't really love tribal, but I think it would be a cool kind of deck to build." I would love to just like drop a vampire and get a token, drop a vampire, get a token, drop a vampire, get a token, go to combat, attack with my 6 vampires, that sort of thing. That sounds really cool to me. So maybe I have to like, ease up and kind of go, well, I don't really care if it's tribal per se. If I'm doing what I want to be doing, which is just like, making tokens or kitting counters or whatnot, getting card advantage, getting value, doing what I want to do mostly in the game and getting to go to combat and punch people, then I shouldn't really care as much. Like again, maybe it won't be fully 100% tribal again, but maybe that'll be the main theme of the deck, is that it's mostly tribal and maybe has a few other artifacts, enchantments, whatnot that help it out, whatnot, and things like that. But I again don't really want to put in too many non-creatures, or creatures rather, that are not vampires, at least, into a deck like that, because if I want to get the maximum value out of a deck like that, I really want it to be as vampire centric as possible. But of course, with a deck like that, it'll be much easier than Squirrels, because Squirrels has, like, again, 5 or 6 cards that are actual squirrels and whatnot. So yeah, it's one of those things. Vampires is much more supported and has a lot more options for me. So I don't know. I still don't know whether I will do it or whether I won't do it. I can't really decide right now, and I'm, still on the fence to a degree about building it. But I certainly have sort of softened a little bit on it, and sort of, as you sort of might have heard going throughout this video and whatnot, that I've sort of softened on tribal in a whole, is saying, oh, well, whatever. So what? I guess to a degree, it's a bit sad, to be like, well, I want to play this cool tribe. Oh, cool. Like, whatever. What was the slime guy? I can't remember his name, but from the recent Crimson Vow, I think that, again, there was like maybe 5 or 6 slimes out there, and everyone was like building it like slime tribal and all of this other stuff. And I was like, it has nothing to do with slimes, but everyone wanted to build slime tribal because that's what all the card does. It's just a, commander with a tribe name, therefore it's this tribe, it's commander, of course, but again, whatever. Sure, whatever. But again, yeah, like, for the most part, I just don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know where I'm at with this. I just want to have a non-green deck that I'm going to be happy with playing. And that's the thing. It's like very hard for me to find a deck that I'm actually happy with playing. And that's why I build most of the decks that I do. People will say you don't build very powerful decks. Well, I don't intend to ever build extremely powerful decks, because mostly I don't really care about that stuff. I care about having fun and playing the game and, whatnot. I will still have answers and removal for problem things or whatnot, or things like that. But, I just won't be running like the most, like perhaps optimal build for something. And this is something I was talking to somebody on Twitter about optimization and things like that. The decks that I have are as optimized probably as what I can probably get them to in the restrictions that I've given myself. And that is a bit of a thing that I've perhaps you would say, well, that's not optimized to the power level. Well, that's not the point. The optimization that I want to do is to building a deck that goes to combat and attacks people. So that's as good as probably this deck can be in doing that, because that's what I want to do. I don't want to just, okay, cool, here I win. I want to play the game and see what other people do and see how other people's decks work, and I want to give them, a game. I want to give them the chance to win. I want to give them, the opportunities to show me what their deck can do or whatnot. And I want to give them the opportunity to see what my deck can do. And I just want to play with my friends and whatnot. That's all I want to do. And I just want to meet new people and play with them. Again, that's one of those things. I just don't consider like CDH or the more optimal ways of like playing to be that fun and that interesting to me and the people that I want to play with most of the time. So, like that's just me. Like, again, I will talk about optimization to a degree and making your deck better and tips and tricks and whatnot. But again, I still don't know much about CDH, like builds and things like that. There's only so much you can do in this area and in this format where it actually increases the power of your deck when you're talking about synergy and things like that. And then you're just talking about, well, combos, specifically high output commanders and whatnot, things like this. So yeah, like that's one of those things where, again, perhaps that's not 100% what we're talking about again, but to a degree it is, because when we're talking about decks and whatnot and things like that, it's all about like where you're at all the time. And I think like I hate power level, as I sort of said a few videos back, and I always consider myself to be in that casually competitive sort of area for the most part. And again, I think that casually competitive area is kind of two-sided. You've got a lot of people that are playing these kind of just fair but strong decks, but then you have a whole bunch of people that are playing unfair decks and whatnot. So it's always hard to go up against unfair decks when you're playing a fair deck, especially when you only have maybe 5 to 6 pieces of removal and you don't really tutor for removal and things like this. Like, again, I just want to see what people's decks do. I don't want to have a handful of bunch of removal spells that don't really advance what I'm doing and just will stop my opponents from doing anything. Like, well, I just don't see the point in that. Like, the point of my deck is to try to win on its own volition, not to just like, well, I'll just play all the things that stop my opponents from winning and then be like, oh, okay, but how do I win? Like, oh yeah, that's right, I don't have any ways to win or whatnot, or I only have this one combo and I have to find, the other part to it, or I have to find the tutor for it and whatnot, and all this sort of stuff. I just don't find that interesting and fun. I just don't, really care about that. And I know that some people disagree with that way of playing and whatnot and whatever, but again, that's just the way that I want to play. And, if people, don't want me to play that way, well, they can, shove it where the sun doesn't shine, essentially, because they have no real control over me and what I do or what anyone does. I have no control over the people that want to play, the way they want to play. They want to play that way, that's the way they want to play. Off you go then. Go have your fun the way you want to have fun. If that's the way you and your friends have fun, then that's it. Like, you do that. But it's not that much fun for people that aren't playing in that way, and not everyone's playing in that way, and not everyone's going to play in that way, and not everyone needs to play in that way. So, again, like, it's the same with Jenk. Like, I always say, why do people play Jenk? I don't really get it, but, like, whatever, at the end of the day, they want to play that way. Good on them. Have fun playing your Jenk or whatever. It's funny to see some decks that are just like decks that are like that. They're like, this was built with a $30 budget and it has no ramp and it has no card draw and, all I have is, creatures, and whatnot, or enchantments or, mostly artifacts or whatnot. All I have is this and that, and maybe I have a few combos maybe in it, but it's very inconsistent because, again, there's no card draw, there's no tutors, this sort of thing. So, and it's a much slower, basic, simple game, or even there's no tutors in it, but there might be, but who knows, because you probably will never see the same two cards together in any given game. There might be a combo in it, but again, you might not ever get to it, and you might not ever get to the same combo twice because you're just like, well, the variance, man, so again, you could find yourself like in one game being like, oh, well, I lose on turn 3 because somebody had their combo in those decks, but in another game, they just like sat there with like nothing happening and nothing really going on. They're like, what happened? Don't you have this combo? And they're like, oh yeah, maybe. I don't know where it is. It's probably in the deck somewhere. Things like that. So again, it's the same with everything. Like, if you don't like subscribe to it, I guess, or don't follow that specific like style of play, I guess you always will like be like wondering why people play that way. And like at the end of the day, I do kind of understand why people play in different ways, but again, I just don't really in another way. I don't really get it. Same with standard, modern, vintage, pioneer, all that stuff. I don't really get why people play that sort of stuff, but whatever. If that's what they want to do, then that's what they want to do. I won't recommend it to a lot of people because I just don't see the point in it per se, and whatnot. Again, this might be a bit different of a discussion to a degree, but when you're looking for, building a deck and whatnot, and when you're going, what do I want to play? And this is all about what do I want to play, and I mostly say I don't want to play tribal, or whatnot. If I'm saying, well, why am I playing pre-release or whatnot? That's why I sort of said to people, does people want to play like, pre-release Brawl or something like that? So all I want to do is play Commander. All I want to do is find some random legendary in my pile that I've pulled and go, okay, cool. I didn't really want to build around this Commander that much for realsies, but you know what? For shits and gigs, for this, little tournament or whatever, and, with whatever cards I have that are in the colours, I'm just going to throw a deck together and, see how we go, and see what happens, and things like that. So, and maybe it's meant to be a tribal commander or semi-tribal commander, but again, how many cards of that tribe that I actually had in my pool? Who knows? Again, it probably doesn't matter because, again, it's just a deck that's going to last maybe an hour or two or whatever, however long the game takes, and then I'm probably going to tear it apart and be like, okay, that was a fun game or whatever, and now I'm going to tear this deck apart and go on and move on with my life, So again, it wouldn't hurt me in that setting in like draft, because I played like Commander Legends draft, as well, and there are still some of those drafts out there, or like in pre-release, if we could get a pre-release Brawl going or a two-headed giant or something like that, whatever, things like that wouldn't hurt me either. Like, just in saying, well, why wouldn't I pick a tribal commander in that? Well, because it doesn't really matter in that format, because again, if I was playing in that format, then, well, my decision making will be less available to me. Like, I won't be able to go, well, I just want to play whatever. I just want to play Muldrotha, Graveyard Deck, blah, 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 whatever is here. Like I won't have that option. Whatever's in the format I want to play, the best of whatever I like, and see how I go. Again, I won't have those options when you play pre-release or when you play draft or whatever. You have very limited options and whatnot, so you have to go, well, I have to play with whatever I get, and just see how that goes. So that can be another way to build a budget deck for some people. They're just like, okay, cool, I built this as a brawl deck, very quickly in pre-release or whatever, or just like at a pre-release event, we all went, okay, cool, this is the stuff we open. We're just like going to concede from the pre-release and just have our own brawl game. That's what we're going to do because that's what we want to do. We just want to play Commander, or we just want to get, building a deck or whatnot that we want to play, not the other formats and whatnot. And we don't really care about the rankings and the competitiveness and buys and whatnot. We don't really care about what's legal in standard. We're not even following it. We don't really care about what cards are going to see play in standard and whatnot. This sort of thing, and how many of this card you're going to need. You're going to need 4 of this. You're going to need 5, whatever. All this crap. Again. So that's how I look at it. I look at it like it's a whole thing. It reaches past just like sitting at a table to play. It reaches to, every part of the format. It reaches to whether you're going to be able to play at a lower or a higher power table sometimes. It matters whether you're going to be able to find enough tribe members on your tribe, and it's going to be worthwhile and things like that. So there's always little things, and I do wish in the future, and I do hope in the future, that they put out more squirrels, because I will keep that deck together and we'll keep building that deck, or I will keep that deck built, and I will keep building it with whatever comes out if I can find any more squirrels one day maybe. But again, I don't just love those decks. I love squirrels because it's janky and funny and silly, and there's all these jokes and whatnot, squirrels in the forest, nuts, whatnot, all this sort of stuff. Winter's coming, all the sort of things. So, that's a very funny and interesting and cool deck because it's got that much flavour to it, that I just kind of go, well, I don't really care that it's a tribal deck. I care that it's a funny, cool, interesting kind of meme deck that is kind of strong sometimes and is just funny and fun to play with, and you can have those games with people that are cool and whatnot. But then again, maybe I am just missing out on that whole experience of just building whatever deck and being like, well, I don't care, whatever, this is a tribal deck for the most part, but maybe I'm a bit too hung up on trying too hard to make it strictly tribal or whatnot, or whatnot, or I'm too hung up on going, well, why would I run that card? That card doesn't make any sense to me. It's a card, I have it, put it in there. It does something, maybe, I don't know. But I don't love cards like that, because I want every card to feel like, yes, it really, works fairly well and does something, or it's ramp, or it's card draw, or something like that. So, just random things don't really make sense to me. But anyway, I wanted to sort of have a bit of a discussion about why I don't really like tribal decks that much. I know I tend to ramble in these videos, and I always do, and I always will, but there you go. That's a lot of the sort of stuff that I wanted to discuss about this specific topic. Some other rambling stuff, but whatever. It does relate to what I'm talking about for the most part. So anyway, guys, you can tell me what you guys think. What are your favorite tribal decks? That you like playing? Whatnot? Do you think I should build the vampire deck? Whatever. You can tell me whatever you want to. I'll be sure to try to respond to all comments. I really do enjoy talking to you guys, discussing all the things, the geeky things that we love. And I'll see you down there in those comments, or I'll see you in the next one. Hey, you've just finished watching one of our videos. A bunch of other videos are popping up on your screen now for you to check out, so why not check them out?